Okay, class, welcome to the Math 1030 support video for Unit 9A, Functions, the building blocks of mathematical models. Okay. What is a mathematical model? Well, a mathematical model, or model, is a representation of something real that helps us understand the real thing. Okay, so mathematical model is foremost a representation, so it's not like the real thing. So it's a representation. Something real, and helps us understand the real thing. Okay, so a good example is a map. Okay, a map has the layout of a city, or the roads, or anything like that, or land terrain, and it's a representation of the real thing. But because we have a map, we have an idea of how the real thing works. Okay, and so we know where the roads are, we know where all the terrain is, where the trails are. All of that stuff is represented in a map, and we can use that to see the real thing. So we usually have a map with us when we see the real thing. Okay, so the key is that it's a representation. What is a function? Well, a function is actually something fun, right? Because the first three letters of a function is fun. Okay, so remember that's what we're going to do. Let's have fun. So a function is a special kind of relationship between two quantities that change. Okay, it's also called covariation. Okay, so it's a relationship between quantities that can change, that do change. They can change, they can stay the same. Okay, so for notation, how you write a function is either the function f of x or capital T of t. Okay, they all represent something. Now that's why we have certain letters here to represent our ideas. We usually take the first letter of our idea and use it as the function. For example, f of x is just a function with x. Okay. T of t, so the f is a function. The x is just a generic variable. Let me rewrite that. Don't run into the other. Okay, so that's a function there. F stands for function. This x was the generic variable. Okay. Now, in a context, we're going to use situations, functions in situations. So t and t, capital T of little t, is a function that means the capital T means temperature. And the little t means time. Okay. Let's take a look at an example function. We can take a look at this relationship from yesterday's weather. And in this case, yesterday was November 15th, 2020. We have our time. So notice that we can attenuate to time here. Time is 6 a.m., 7 a.m., all the way into 12. Here's the next column of time, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So time goes from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And when we're looking at temperature, notice that it is 41 degrees and all that, all the way down to 46 in that column. And this column is the same, 48 to 46. Okay, so we have time and temperature, and those are the quantities that change in this example. All right, so what they want us to know next is they want us to say, what are the variables in the example? Well, the variables are time and temperature. Those are the things that change. Okay. What is the dependent variable and what is it in the example? Okay, so the key word here is dependent variable. Okay, what is a dependent variable? Well, a dependent variable is a variable whose quantity or value depends on another. In this example, the dependent variable is temperature. Okay, because it depends on time. What is an independent variable? And what is it in this example? Well, an independent variable is a variable whose quantity or value does not depend on another. So our key word here is independent variable. Variable whose quantity or value does not depend on another. In this example, time is the independent variable. Okay. All right, so now we've looked at dependent variables and independent variables. We're going to represent a function here with a graph. So what we've done here is this is a representation of a function as a table. Okay, so table representation. And now we're going to take a look at it as a graph. So the graph will be drawn where we put our independent variable on the horizontal axis. So that's time. Time is going to go on the horizontal axis here. And the dependent variable is going on to the vertical axis. Dependent is temperature. The temperature is going to go here. Okay, so let's go ahead and label our axes with time and temperature. Now the time is in hours, okay? And we'll keep that at each of the individual numbers, okay? And temperature is this way. Okay. All right, so time. Well, our time starts at 6 a.m. So for short, I'll put 6A. I'm just going to count here. 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 9 a.m., 10 a.m. 12 p.m., 1 p.m. We're going to extend our axis a little bit. Okay, so there's all of our variables along the horizontal axis. Now we're going to go ahead and do the ones on the vertical axis for temperature. Okay, so according to my table here, my time went from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Okay, so I put all of the range on there, on the axis. But our temperatures go from 41 degrees to 40, well, the smallest temperature is going to be 40 degrees, and the highest temperature is going to be 51 degrees. That's the range that we need to put on the y, or on the vertical axis. So 40 to 51 is where we need to go. Okay, so we'll start here, and put a break here, make this one 40. And let's pull this guy out a little bit more. Okay. Our top temperature is going to be 51. Let's just do 50 degrees. So from 40 to 50, we need to put 10 marks. So in the middle will be mark number 5, so it's 45 degrees. 40, 41, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. So there's our axis there for our vertical axis. It's all ready. Okay, so this is a break, not tick marks right here. All right, now we can go ahead and plot our points. Okay, so for every point, we have 6 a.m., 41 degrees, 7 a.m., 40 degrees. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use another copy of the graph and plot the points. Okay, so right here, I'm going to zoom in here so we get a good picture of our plotting our points. So 6 a.m., 41 degrees. So start here at 41, put a dot. 7 a.m., 40 degrees, so it goes down a little bit. 8 a.m., 41 degrees, goes back up to 41. 9 a.m. is 43 degrees, going up to here. 10 a.m. is 45 degrees. It's about up here. 11 a.m. is 47 degrees. Oops. Right about here. 12 p.m. 12 p.m. is 46 degrees, so it went down a little bit. 1 p.m. is up to 48 degrees. 2 p.m. is at 50. 3 p.m. is at 51. 4 p.m. is at 50. 5 p.m. is at 49. 6 p.m. is at 46. The big drop there. Oh, right here. Okay, so here's the temperature over the day. We can draw our line, our curve for a function. Okay, up and down and up and down, going through here and down that way. Okay, so it's very curved. It's not going to be like perfect, these straight segments, because the temperature flows gradually between degrees. Okay. So I'm doing a lot of marks here so I can make a good flowing function. Oops, missing that one. There we go. Okay, so there's our function, and here's our points again. Okay, so what we do need to know about this function, we have it plotted as a nice curve. Okay. What do we want to know about it? What is domain? Okay, and write a description. Write a description and indicate it in the graph above. So domain is the set of values of the independent variable. Okay. Okay, that both make sense and are of interest to the function. Okay. So in this case, we have data values from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And I chose that one on purpose so that we can have a restricted domain. Okay. So I'm just going to kind of insert this right here to right here. Even though there's time that goes on, 7 p.m. has a temperature, 8 p.m. and so on, my function is only going to be between these two parts. And so this is the domain. Okay? How much it spans the x-axis. Okay? What is range? Well, it's a set of values of the dependent variable that correspond to all the values in the domain. Okay. Oops. So set of values of the dependent variable that correspond to the values in the domain. Okay. So I'm going to sketch that out in purple as well. Now the values, the lowest value is 40 degrees. Okay. So we can draw a little thing here. Going up to the highest value is 51 degrees. Okay. This is the range. Okay. All right, so the domain for our example is, again, from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. The range in our example is 40 degrees to 51 degrees. Okay? So that's how much it spans. There's more temperatures. There's lower temperatures than 40. There's higher temperatures than 50. But our graph is only going to span those values. Okay? All right, let's go ahead and do another function investigation using water. But before I do, I wanted to talk about the power of the function that we have here for our temperature. One of the things that we have with this nice curve is that we can what we call interpolate the situation. So finding a point between points. So we've recorded data at certain points, but we can talk about what happens between points. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in here on this functional graph here. And I'm going to make a note of the time. We have time recorded at 12 p.m. That's 46 degrees. And at 1 p.m. is 48 degrees. But what about 12:30? Okay. We can use our function to help us know what the temperature is at 12:30 by drawing a dashed line up to our function curve. Hit it right here at this point here, and then we'll bring it over to our y-axis, our vertical axis, to see what the temperature is. And it looks like it's going to be the same temperature as it was at 11, okay, because those are hitting the same level. Okay, which looks like it is at 47 degrees, okay, which is true. It's the same temperature. So 12:30 has a temperature of 47 degrees, just like 11 p.m. did, a.m. did. Okay, so we can find out what temperatures are like in between data points. Extrapolation is when we figure out, like, okay, what is the temperature going to be after our curve? And so we kind of trace our curve down here and we continue it on till 7 p.m. So let's pretend that 7 p.m. is right about here. Okay, and what is our data point at that time? Okay, so we're going to kind of estimate it, hopefully draw a straight line. Right down a little bit there. Okay, and we're going to say that, okay, at 7 p.m. it's going to be right at 42 degrees. Okay, so that's called extrapolation. So we can extend our pattern, our model, to some place that we don't know, maybe in the future. Okay, so that's what's great about functions, okay, mathematical models. We can use it to make decisions about the future, about things in between. All right, let's go now to our water experiment. In this experiment, you will track two quantities that vary, namely the quantity of water and the height of the water in the container. Okay. So for this experiment, you need a container, preferably glass so you can see through it, and you need some sort of measuring cup that can give you the same quantity of water at a time. Okay. Which quantity will be the dependent variable? Okay, which one depends on the other? Well, it turns out that the height of the water in a container, as you fill it up, depends on the amount of water that's in there. Okay, so which one is the dependent variable? It's going to be the height of the water in the container. Okay, which quantity will be the independent variable? Well, the independent variable is the amount of water. That's going to be the same no matter what. It doesn't depend on anything. Amount or volume of water. Okay. So what we're going to do is the container, the height of the container, we're going to measure in inches. That's what my measuring device is in. I'm using a tape measure. And the amount of water is going to be in cups, because that's my device that I have as a small measuring cup. Okay, so we're going to conduct the experiment with our container and graph the results on the first set of axes. Then we're going to record the results of a neighbor on the second set to compare. Okay, so again, we're going to say our as we set up our axis to record our data, our independent variable is going to be on the horizontal axis. Okay, so that's our amount of water. Okay, we'll put that there. Same thing for our second set of data. Okay. And on our vertical axis, we're going to do our height in inches. Okay. Same thing for this set of data. All right. Okay, so we're going to do our experiment. Now our experiment will be recorded on two graphs, on a graph here. I'm going to just put the numbers in here on the side. So we have our volume and our height. Okay, so we're going to record them right here, and then we'll transfer them onto the graph, like make some sort of curve. Okay, volume and height. Yes, the volume was in cups. Height is going to be inches. Okay, I'll zoom in here as we record. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and conduct the experiment on the next clip. And I'll record my data, and then I'll transfer it to this graph. Okay, so here we're ready for our water experiment. So I have my container that has a curved bowl shape. It's narrow at the bottom and wider as you go up to the top. I have my measuring cup here. It is a 1/2 cup measurement cup. And I have my measuring device, just a good old tape measure. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and start my experiment by pouring 1/2 cup of water into my container, measuring the height and recording that height. Okay, so here's our first 1/2 cup. I'm going to measure that amount right here. And I get that it is just over half of just over 1 inch. So it's 1 1/4 inches. Write that down. Okay, let's get our next half cup ready with water. We'll pour it into our measuring device, into our container there. And we'll go ahead and measure again. Okay, so now we're up at just over 1 1/2 inches. So maybe 1 5/8. So we're at 1 5/8 inches now. Let's pour in our next half cup. Okay, where are we at on our measuring thing here? Okay, we are just about at 2 inches. Exactly. So we're at 2 inches there for our next half cup. Okay, let's pour in our next half cup. We'll go ahead and measure the height. This height is, okay, so it's just about 2 1/2 inches. And a little bit below that. 2 3/8 inches. Go with 2 3/8. Okay, let's pour in another half cup. And we are at 2 3/4 inches. Okay, we're going to pour in one more half cup. All right, that put us at 3 inches. Okay. So we've noted down all of our numbers, and we'll go back to our other handout video. Okay, so for my first graph, I have recorded all of my data. I've set up my scales and my axes. I'm going to now record each of the data points. So I start out with 0, 0, because there's 0 volume, 0 cups of water in there, and there's no height. I'm going to put half a cup in, and I get 1 1/4 inches in height. So jumps right up to 1 1/4, which is right here, pretty quickly. Then it goes to 1 5/8, which is just over 1 1/2. So at 1 cup, I have 1 1/2, just over that, which is about here. Next is I have 1 1/2 cups, and it's 2 inches. So it's just right here. At 2 cups, I have 2 3/8 inches, which is just under 2.5 for that value. The next value is 2.5 cups. It's at 2 3/4 inches, which is right about here. And then 3 cups in 3 inches, which is right here. Okay. So plotting my graph, it kind of goes up steeply, and then it kind of levels out. Okay. So it's a nice incline, but it starts out steep. Okay, so there's my container. Another interesting part is finding these common differences between them. So how much height is gained for every half a cup. So with this one, we know that it's actually 1 1/4. Okay, so 1.25 inches. So from 1/4, let's do 1 1/4 there. You can go decimals or fractions. I'd like to do both, but let's just go fractions here for a second. Between 1 1/4 and 1 5/8. So 1/4 is the same as 2/8, so the difference is 3/8. So 2/8 to 5/8 is 3/8. 5/8 to 2 is also 3/8. And 2 to 2 3/8 is also 3/8. 2 to 2 3/4. So 3/8 is, so 3/4 is actually 6/8. So it's also a difference of 3/8. And we have a difference of 1/4 or 2/8 from these ones. Okay. So once we get up to 3 cups in my container, that's when it starts to level out a little bit more. Okay, so that's that's why we have mostly constant data points here. Okay. So at this one, it'll start to level out a little bit and get smaller. Kind of make that one a little bit smaller there. Oops, that took off too many. Okay, so here's our data points on our graph. Okay. All right, let's compare with a neighbor right here. Okay, so I have some data from a neighbor, and I'll go ahead and draw that on there. Now I have my axes scaled and labeled. I'll go ahead and plot the data now. So I have 0, 0, 1/4, and 1 1/2. 1/2, 2 1/2. 3/4, 3 1/4. 1 5. 1 1/4, 6 1/4. Okay. So here's our curve. It's different than mine. Okay. Do that out. That needs to go up a little bit more. You get 6 1/4 here. Okay. Now my friend's shape. Okay, so mine has a shape of, let me make this a little bit bigger here. So mine was a bowl-like shape. It's going to draw it in here. Okay. Bowl-like shape like this. Okay. My friend's was a bowl. It was a shape like this. So one of those juice jars. All right. So let's compare. Compare the two graphs. How can you tell when the container is narrow? How can you tell when it's wide? Okay. So my container starts out narrow and then it gets wider and wider. Okay. So narrow looks like a steep curve. And then wider is the less steep curve. Okay. This is the power of functions. Okay, we can kind of make this generalization. Okay, so I'm going to adjust my friends a little bit to make it a little bit more like those juice jars. Okay, so nope, I think I might have had a better one here. Let's just go with this one. Okay, notice that is a little bit wide at the bottom. Okay, so here's our wider, less steep part right here. Okay, it's wider up here for mine. Narrow is right here. Narrow is right here. And right here for this one. Okay. So we can use the power functions to do that. So notice that's similar for both of these functions here. Okay. Now, so we're comparing the two graphs. How can we tell when the container is narrow? The graph is steep. That means that less water is needed for height. Okay. How can you tell when the container is wide? Well, the graph is less steep. And more water is needed to gain height. Okay, so functional relationship. Okay, we can tell about something about the real life. Okay, let's take a look at this table here. And from this table, we did the same experiment. And using what we deduced in parts D and E about narrowness and wideness, let's sketch the shape of the container. Okay, so we have our table form. Okay, so those tables are a little bit harder sometimes to see, but we have our function graph, our graph form. That with this picture, we can kind of see more. Let's take a look at what's going on here. Using the same analysis, we have red is steep. Okay, so this one is steep, a steep graph, which means that the jar or the container is narrow at this point. Okay, and then we have our widening out. Okay, so this is less steep. that means our jar is wider. Oops, that actually looks like it continues for a little bit of most of this here. Okay, so let's take right here. Let's do that right here. And it's a little bit steeper here where it's narrow, okay? So there's our analysis. Let's go ahead and try and draw this container. Sketch it out. So it's narrow at the bottom. Okay, narrow at the bottom. It goes a little bit wider at the middle. It comes a little bit more narrow. And it goes a little bit wider. Okay. And this is actually a Third Friends container, which is a cocktail glass or a wine glass. Okay, so that looks like it applies to this function. So this is a power function. I can communicate information and I can draw representations, okay, of real life phenomenon. So explain how we know what shape the container is. So it's narrow at the bottom. Because of steepness in the graph. It's wider in the middle and top. Because graph is less steep. Okay. All right. What is the last things that we're going to look at are domain and range, just to help review that. What is the domain of the function? What is the range? So let's go ahead and zoom in on our graph again. And I'll use purple here to indicate the domain and range. So it starts at 0 for a domain. Domain is how much the data spans the x-axis. And so I have data points all the way until 1.5 cups. Okay, this again was the domain. And the range starts at 0. And it goes all the way up the y-axis. Let's see how much the data spans that one. This is the range. Okay, so it goes from 0 to 3.5 inches. Okay, so let's go here. What is the domain and range? So the domain, and that's the important part right here. Range, important one there. The domain is how much data we span from the x-axis. So a domain is 0 to 1 and 1/2 cups. Okay, there's obviously you can have more cups, but we're only looking at 0 to 1.5 cups. Range is 0 to 3.5 inches. Okay, that's as far as it spans. All right, that's all we have for this section. Hope you enjoyed the video and had fun with functions. Let me know if you have any questions.